Pharaoh, the story says, takes a liking to little Moses. And so much so that even above his own children and other grandchildren, Moses is in line to take over the kingdom when Pharaoh steps off the throne. Yes. Which says now that Moses now has remember he was a slave, yes, born a slave, but now he's in the palace. He has the best of all that there is to offer. He has all kind of breadfruit and ackee. He's got everything that his heart can desire. He is eating from the king's table. He is being taught by the most learned philosophers and astrologers of the land. Every art of warfare and military strategy he is being taught. All of the sciences. And remember, at this point in time, Egypt is the single superpower in a one superpower world. Egypt is at its apex and height of culture and civilization at this time. And Moses gets the best of it all.
Amen. Amen.
Which makes this verse sound really weird. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the back side of the desert. This text finds Moses not just in the desert. The desert is a dry place. It's a lonely place. It's a desolate place. It's a place that nobody typically chooses to go and live in. You don't choose to go and inhabit a dry and a lonely place, a vacant place, a place where there's no civilization. Usually that's not a choice that anybody makes on their own. I would almost suggest or imagine that for the last 2 years, there's a whole lot of people that feel like they have been in a desert. With the quarantine and the sickness and all the stuff, haven't been able to do everything that we've wanted to do. There are a lot of folk who have felt like that they have been living in a desert. Desert is defined as a place that gets less than 10 millimeters of rain every year. I found out some interesting things about a desert. A desert can also, when we talk about the amount of water, people think that sometimes a desert is a place that simply does not get a lot of water. As I looked up the definition of a desert, it does not say that a desert is a place that does not get 10 millimeters or less of what? Water. That's not what it says. It says it is a place that receives less than 10 millimeters of rain. And as I began thinking about that, I began realizing that there is a difference between water and rain. There is a difference between water and rain. I come to learn this when I was living in South Georgia, pastoring in South Georgia. When I got moved to South Georgia, I moved there from Avon Park. And when I got there, I went to scout out some land. My dad picked up the phone, called me, and said, "When you're going up, I'll go with you." And so he rode up with me as we were starting to look for some houses and stuff. He said, "Man, this is nice up here. I think I might want to retire and move up here." And that's exactly what he did. And so I was single at the time, and so I stopped looking for a place just for me, and we started looking for a place for all of us. And we found a little place. It was in a little place called Jessup, Georgia. It was a huge piece of property. It was about 47 acres of land, a nice big house that would accommodate everybody, all the three of us and what have you. And we found out that the cost of living in South Georgia was a whole lot different from the cost of living in South Florida, or even Florida where they were in the Orlando area. And so we got this place, and of course, my father's from Trinidad, and so you can't have all this land. Stop looking at me like that. And so you can't, a Trinidadian is not going to have all of that land and not do what? Plant a garden, that's right. And so we went out into the forest and I cut down some trees and I put the trees and built a fence up all around the garden. We got out there and we plowed this field. And it was we put down, what did we put down? We put down some lettuce and some tomatoes and some cucumbers and there my mama is from Birmingham, so we had to put down some collard greens. And we had to put down we did not get any callaloo. I was working on getting some callaloo. But we put in a whole of green beans and onions and all kinds of stuff we planted in that field. Now, this field was some distance from the house where the hose was. And so I got into the habit of either doing it or watching my dad take, and we had to take about 6 50-foot hoses and put them, connect them together in order to reach all the way over there. And those hoses were heavy. And you get that hose and you be pulling that thing across that yard. And sometimes we would stand there and water it. Other times we would turn on, put a little sprinkler head and sprinkle that thing. And as much as we watered that garden, I got to the point where there was one thing we could not figure out. We could water and water and water and water, and those little buds, those little plants, when we would water them, they would say, thank you. They just perk up just a little bit. But there was always something different about those greens and about those plants when it would rain. They would respond to rain differently than they would respond to water. And that thing used to mess with my, why does rain do something different in this garden than the water does? Because in reality, there was a whole lot more water that we were putting on there more regularly than it got rain. And so I had a cousin that was the chair of a biology department at one of our colleges, and I called him and I said, Doc, what's going on? What's the difference? What's happening? He said, well, Anslem, this is the difference. This is what's happening. He said, rain is generated in the clouds. And when rain is generated in the clouds, it happens when there is a disturbance in the atmosphere. And when there is a disturbance in the atmosphere, usually it causes some friction and there's some lightning that takes place up in the clouds. And when the clouds are saturated with moisture, and when the lightning strikes up in the clouds, it adds a charge to the water molecules so that as they fall, there is an electrical charge that comes down in the water. And so when it hits the groundwater does not have the same kind of charge that the rainwater has. There's something different about rainwater, rain, than there is from just water. And I would suggest that there's a whole lot of people that have been in life. We have been settling for water when what we really need is rain. I remember that Elijah was sitting up on the hill after he had just embarrassed Ahab and the prophets of Baal up on Mount Carmel. And remember when he was sitting up on the mountain looking out over the sea. And Elijah was not praying for water. He was praying for rain. Because he knew that what the people needed now wasn't just water. Remember, he was looking out over a lake. There was water there, but what they needed was rain. I would declare to you and to me tonight that there's some times in life where there's that, can I say this? Can I say this? There are some spouses waking up every morning and rolling over to water because they did not pray for rain. What they really needed was rain, but they settled for water. There's a whole lot of people that are settling for water. What they really need is rain. God did not call you to that job. You settled at that job because it provided a little bit of moisture. But that moisture is not enough to give you that charge that you need to make it on. You needed rain. There are people that are settling for water in their lives when what they really need is rain. Amen. And so you can, because here's the reality, is that there can be a whole lot of water around you, but you're still in a desert. Yeah. So here was the second definition that Webster gave of a desert. A desert can be, watch this one through me. A desert can be a body of water in which there is little to no life. Did you catch that?
Yeah.
That even in the midst of a body of water, there can be a desert in the ocean, which means that you are surrounded, there is water all around you, but it is producing little to no life. Rain will produce life. Here's another unfortunate reality, is that there are people among us who are coming to church every week. They are surrounded by water, not ordinary water. Here, can I, another story. Here's Jesus, and I'm going to wrap up with this. Here's Jesus, he's walking, and on his way, the disciples are with him. He gets tired in the middle of the morning of the day, because it's been a long journey early in the morning. He stops and he sits by a well. As he's sitting by this well, he tells his disciples, I want you to go ahead into the city and buy some food and bring it back. Now, it seems a little odd that Jesus, this perfect individual, would get tired, but he sits by the well. While he's sitting there at the well, there is a woman of Samaria that comes to draw water from the well. While she is at the well, Jesus looks at her and he says, would you give me some water, please? I don't even hear it say it like that. When you read it in the King James Version, it sounds a little rough. I think he calls her woman. If I ever called my mom a woman, or my wife woman. Actually, I might do that when I'm playing with her, but I usually don't get away with it. But he says, would you draw for me some water? And she gets a little attitude. She says, I see that you're there, but you have nothing to draw with. And now Jesus gets a little bit more sassy with her. He said, woman, if you knew who it was that asked of you water, then you would instead ask of him what? Not ordinary water, but living water. He says, watch this, he says that I am able to place in you, give you water which will never go dry. I will put in you a well, and watch this. This is that correct. He says, I'm going to put in you living water. The water that you're drawing from, this well will eventually run dry. This water will not satisfy ultimately. What you really need is living water. And I can give you this living water so that, watch me now, so that you can be in a desert, but a desert doesn't have to be in you. If you've got living water on the inside, there can be a desert all around. There can be loneliness and emptiness and isolation and depression. All that can be all around you. But watch this. In the midst of a stingy, mean, cantankerous family in the house, you do not have to be a desert in the midst of that circumstance. In the midst of a house like that, in the midst of a marriage like that, in the midst of a church like that, you do not have to be a desert in the middle of a desert. You can be a source of living water if you let the living water be on the inside of you. So here is Moses. Moses keeping the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law. Y'all see what's happening here, right, with Moses? I don't have time to finish this tonight, but Moses went from the prestige and the power and the privilege of the palace to living in his father-in-law's house, tending his father's sheep, like a hired hand, like a servant. Moses perhaps is feeling not, and the text says he's not just in the desert, he's in the backside of the desert. That's like there are some folk who are broke, and then there are some folk who are on the backside of broke. Can I have a witness? There are some folk who are to do all this here. Yeah. The backside, okay, here we go. I used to work at Disney World. Did I tell y'all that? I used to where I grew up. First job was working at Disney World. At Disney World, we had on stage and we had backstage. On stage, everything was nice and beautiful and pretty and tidy and clean, and that's where everybody could see everything that you wanted them to see. When we were on stage, they would tell us, I don't care how bad your drive was to work. They would say, I don't care how much you fought with your mama, your daddy, your wife, or your husband. When you are on stage, you take that and you leave that backstage. You don't go on stage because there are guests. We didn't have customers at Disney World. We had guests. When you are hosting your guests, you need to provide for them a Disney day. And a Disney day is not an ordinary day. A Disney day is a fun day. It's a happy day. It's a joyful day. It's a family day. And so what's on stage is very different from what is backstage. On stage, if there was a scuff on the wall, 10 minutes later, somebody was there painting that scuff to make sure that it was picture perfect, because we had people traveling from all over the world to have not a good day, not a great day, but a Disney day. But that was all on stage. I worked in a restaurant. In the restaurant, I was dipping fries and flipping burgers. Sometimes I was downstairs in culinary. What people who visit Disney World as a guest never know is that while you are on stage, you're seeing all of the glitz and glamour of Disney, that backstage does not look anything like on stage. Backstage, there are tunnels that run all up under the Magic Kingdom in Walt Disney World. And the tunnels is how we as employees, as cast members, that's how we got to work. We would pull up in a bus, or we'd pull up in a parking lot, we'd hop on a bus, the bus would drop us off at the tunnels, and we'd walk to the tunnels, go to wardrobe, get our clothes, and then walk to our place of business, all in the tunnels, and then come up the stairs or elevator and get to wherever it is we were working in the park. But on our way backstage, we had to walk by. Remember, I was in a restaurant. And so I had to walk by all the dumpsters where all the old food and bad food from culinary and from the kitchen was thrown. So we would bring up plates of what would we make? We make cheesesteak. And the steak would come up in these big industrial trays. It would be a cart would be this high, and then there are trays, all of those carts. And those trays had steak in them. And those steak were held in plastic bags. And so when we would go to the grill and we take the steak, you had to cut the bag, take the steak out of the bag and put it on the grill. And you get your stuff and chop up. But the trays, when you take that bag out of the trays would be like this thick, and they'd be this deep in what? In blood. That's right. You know something about that. There'd be blood. And what do you think happened with all of that blood? They would take the trays, because some of the guys, when they knew I was a vegetarian, they would try to gross me out. They would take those trays full of blood after they take it, and they take the tray, hold it over the grill, and they just pour all the blood, all of that fluid all over the steak in the grill. Others would take it, and there were drains in the floor. And they would take that blood, all that goop and all that, and they would pour it through the drains. And guess where those drains ended up? Backstage in the desert. And you know how that stuff would smell after a few hours or after a few days? Backstage. There's a difference between being in the desert and being on the backside of the desert. This is where Moses finds himself tending his father's sheep. Moses grew up, taught at his mother's knee to 12 years old, believing that one day he would be the deliverer of the Jews. He believed this even while he was getting all of this high-class, falutin education. He believed that one day day he would be the one privileged enough to free his people from bondage. He believed it so much that about the year he turned 40 years old, he was walking through Egypt and he saw an Egyptian taking advantage, beating and messing with one of his kinsmen. And he said, I will not stand for this injustice. And he goes over and with his bare hands, he slays this Egyptian, thinking that it's about time for me to let my people go. See, this is what he's thinking. And yet now, this was when he was 40 years old. By the time we get to Exodus chapter 3, 40 more years have passed. He is now 80 years old, and now he is on the backside of the desert. His dreams have not come true. Well, this is what I just want to share to you, and I'm going to move. There's somebody here or somebody you know whose dreams have not come true yet. They have seen this vision of themselves achieving this, becoming that, or having this. And it's a dream, and maybe it's even been a God-breathed dream, but they have not realized it yet, and they're feeling like they should be here, they should be in the boardroom by now, but they're still in the mail room. They're feeling like they should have gotten a raise, or they should have been promoted by now. They're thinking that, feeling like they should have been married by now, should have been established by now, and yet they're feeling like they are still on the backside of the desert. Well, this is what I want to leave you with. Listen, it is in the backside of the desert. It is in the quietness and the stillness of the desert that Moses passes by the mountain of God in Horeb. It is on the backside of the desert, as we keep on reading in Exodus chapter 3, that Moses sees a bush that is on fire, but it is not consumed. It is on the backside of the mountain that as he approaches this bush, he hears the voice of God saying, Moses, take off your shoes, for the ground on which you are standing is holy ground. Moses, I've still got a job for you to do. Moses, it's not you delivering your people. It's me delivering my people. There's something that happens at the backside of the desert that God uses to humble us so that he can fit us, so that he can use us to achieve not what we desire, but what he has already commanded. This is the thing that happens in the backside of the desert. So if you're on the backside of the desert tonight, if you know somebody that is on the backside of the desert, you need to give them a word of encouragement that it is in the desert that God will send. God says, I will make a way in the wilderness. I will create rivers in the desert. I will be able to give you everything that you need in order to sustain you and keep you and prepare you so that when time comes for you to stand up and speak up and live up to all of the potential that I have placed in you, you'll be able to do it. Because I use, God says, the emptiness, the loneliness, the avoidance of all of the distractions of the desert to prepare you for that thing that I breathed you into existence to accomplish. Father, this evening we are grateful that you are a God who often leads us to the backside of the desert, not to punish us, but to prepare us. Father, some have felt that they're on the backside of the desert, that it is a punishment, but we're grateful that it is preparation. You are preparing us for something. There's some stuff in us that needs to be worked out of us. There's some stuff that we have grown on the inside of us that cannot be used. And so, Father, while some of us may even now be on the backside of the desert, Father, I am praying that you would help us to be humble enough to empty ourselves of those things which you cannot use, so that you can fill us with everything that you can use, so that we can live out the destiny for which we have been chosen, the destiny for which you've called us to the kingdom at such a time as this. Father, use us, teach us on the backside of the desert so that when it comes time to set your people free, that you can use us in a powerful and a mighty way. We thank you. We ask these blessings in Jesus' name.
Amen. 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 Praise the Lord.
We appreciate you all coming out tonight. It's good to see all of you again. I know I owe you a phone call. We want to remind you that the funeral for Elder and Sister Brooks' son is going to be